Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Commerce Lab by Ecomcy, the place of everything related to Amazon FBA, private label, and e-commerce. My name is Vincenzo Toscano, your host, founder, and CEO of Ecomcy. And today, we bring another special guest. Her name is Ayat, and she's the co-founder of Invest, one of the top companies out there that they specialize on everything around consumer psychology and user experience. And that's why I wanted to bring Ayat today to the podcast because we know when it comes to e-commerce, conversion is king, and I feel specifically those that are very into the marketplace world and they're trying to jump to D2C, they struggle to really understand what are some of those elements that make a website top notch when it comes to conversion. So those are some of the things we're going to be talking today to learn some of those tips so you guys can implement that once you start implementing that within your e-commerce business. So Ayat, it's a pleasure. Thank you so
Glad
much for
to be
coming to
here.
the show. How you doing?
Great, doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I was having a look at your background, and you have like over 18 years of experience when it comes to this. So I can't wait to learn from you. I think understanding the psychology behind the consumer that you're trying to sell to is the main thing, right? Because I feel all the time people focus so much on only having the right product or the right advertisement strategy, but they don't really understand the psychology behind that niche. And I'm very intrigued to learn what are some of those tips or strategy to do that within your e-commerce business. Before we jump into that, though, as I already said, you have such an amazing background. So tell us a little bit about how you jump in the space and how you became an expert when it comes to this topic.
Well, started investment in 2006. With the really, it was initially I was kind of doing some freelancing and then writing some SEO content
Yeah.
at the time. I mean, this early 2000s is when, like, if you
Yeah.
kind of keyword stuff like certain content, you can get some rankings. So would do a lot of that, but a lot of the clients that I worked with really wanted to learn more about, well, like how do once they get to the site, the acquisition's great. We're getting all these, customers coming through, but they're not actually buying anything or they're not actually converting. So I became so intrigued with the whole
Yeah.
topic. And then took some additional marketing courses and actually went to a workshop on just conversion rate optimization. I was like blown away and I'm like, oh my God, this is something that I really need to jump on. And at the
Yeah.
time, really, like, CRO was not something people discussed. They always would talk about SEO, they talk about, PPC, but they would never talk about conversion rate optimization. And whenever I would bring up the topic, it was almost like you're re-educating people. But it's like, okay, well, you've worked all that, spent all that money, made all that effort acquiring all these customers, bringing them to your site, and then you actually don't have enough on your website to actually convert them into paying customers, loyal customers, etc. So there's a lot of details that go into that, but that's kind of how I got started in 2009. I co-authored with my business partner a book on conversion rate optimization. It's an Amazon bestseller. It's called literally Conversion Optimization: The Art and Science of Persuading Visitors into Customers. And then I've been speaking also across the world. Really, even last year I was in Bucharest and
Nice.
and kind of some other places just to kind of talk about conversion rate optimization. So it's been really amazing. I mean, it's been an amazing ride. It's a wonderful field to be in because there's so much that goes into everything that we do.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing background. So yeah, I feel like, and you said that 100% right. Like, I feel you can have all the things right in terms of what we've been talking about, the product advertisement and so on. But if you don't have the experience on point and you don't understand the psychology behind, like, it's definitely you're gonna drop the ball somewhere, and that's where we see brands having a big struggle. And I guess so we can dive into the topic today is that I would like to understand, and especially for listeners, when you're pivoting and doing, for example, jump to D2C, like, those are some of the things that most people don't have experience with, like understanding what are some of those elements that you must have across, let's say, your website to provide the best customer experience and really tap into the psychology of a client or potential client so they can make a purchase. So I guess my first question is, what are some of those key elements you feel like most people leave out of the strategy when it comes to conversion that you feel like is a must to really have to ensure that journey is as frictionless as possible, basically? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that are really important. I think number one is when you're kind of making that migration, a lot of companies have what I think they suffer from the Amazon effect, which is like this
Yes.
effect of like trying to make their site as close to Amazon.com. But the reality is, look, you have a unique value, you have a unique brand. And what really needs to be apparent for your customer is that brand and that value. Because otherwise, you're just going to end up, to them, seem like another Amazon. Why wouldn't they just go to Amazon and purchase the same exact product? So in
Yeah.
order to distinguish yourself, and there's a lot of people out there that are making the switch of like, I no longer want to support big
Exactly.
corporations. I want to go for those little, smaller companies. So if that's the case, then you really need to build that brand as much as possible. So that's the one thing I would say, is that don't hesitate. Don't sit there and just copy everything that you see on Amazon and think, well, this is it. This is what I have to do. Like, this is the holy grail, and I have to
Yeah.
follow this, because it really isn't. And I've seen so many companies that follow the same formatting and look and feel of Amazon, and they end up really just hurting themselves. So
Yeah.
build your brand, be unique, make sure that your value that you offer is very identifiable on the site.
Yeah.
So that's kind of number one thing I would say. Number two is, I find a lot of companies sometimes don't have what I call continuity between the
Mm,
ads that they have and then the actual website. So you have to make sure that that link is clear. Like, okay, if I have a specific type of ad and it has certain headline and it has a certain image and it has a certain, like, it's promising something specific to the customer, but then they get to the landing page and it does not have those things immediately visible. You have 5 seconds to convince that visitor, and some people even say less than that. You need to make sure that that continuity is clear, that they know that the ad that they clicked on brought them to this page. They see the same offer, they see the same image, they see the same, headline, in order for them to understand that, okay, yes, this is exactly where I should be. And this is exactly why I clicked here. But you're just building on that specific offer that you've already given them. So that landing page experience is really important. And making sure that you have enough of that continuity. We say, in general, in the CRO world, this enhances trust and confidence. And you want to
yeah.
make sure that one of the key things immediately is to really enhance that trust and confidence in the visitor as much as possible. But then think about, like, what are those questions that my visitor will have once they get to the page? Okay, so I've established the continuity, but then now they're going to dig a little bit deeper. So you want to make sure that you have your brand values, you have your benefits. Those are clearly stated and they're easily accessible. They don't have to like scroll very, very deep on the page in order for them to find all that information.
Yeah.
Now, what I would say is, you can't find this information just like that, just by
Hmm.
guessing. Don't just guess. We have tools, amazing tools that give us all
Yes.
of this information. So
Yeah.
I find also companies sometimes hesitate. I mean, I know that there's more now interest in, of course, obviously analytics. Everybody should,
Yep.
that's like the basic. But even
Yeah.
within analytics, segment your data. Make sure that you're at least looking at mobile and desktop separately. Like, look, the mobile customer is very different than your desktop customer. And right now, of course, we're seeing majority of our customers, it's like almost like a 70%, 30% split between mobile and desktop. But dig deeper, understand the sources that are driving them. What are those pages that they're landing on? What is that experience like? Where are they dropping off? What are the high exit rates? What's the page value for all your visitors throughout the site, throughout the funnel, on on the devices separately? Those are all really some key questions. But then also there's some tools that give you heat mapping. I can figure out how deep my visitors are
Hmm.
scrolling. We use, so I am co-founder of Invest, but I'm also co-founder of a tool called FigPie.
Okay.
FIGPII. And it's basically heat mapping, session recording, polling, and then also on top of it, A/B
Yeah.
testing. Because most
Nice.
tools, for example, like if you have like the hot jar versions that just offer the heat map, session recording, polling, but then you have like VWOs, which is like strictly A/B testing, and they have some hot heat map and session recording, but it's within the experiments. But this is kind of offers everything. But those are great tools, whichever you use. It
Hmm.
doesn't really matter. We're pretty
Yeah.
agnostic when it comes to tools, but use a tool, because there's so much
Exactly.
information that you can get there, and you can learn a little bit more about the customer behavior, because that's one of the key things that you want to kind of understand. How are they navigating my site? What are they clicking on? Why are they clicking here? You
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
asking questions once you find out this information.
Yeah. That's super important. And let's start with the first point, actually, the continuity. I can't tell you how many times I see an ad. It looks very nice. I click on it, and then I end up on a ClickFunnels landing page with all blanket thing, buy now, and all of here, and it breaks all the branding, breaks all the continuity, and yeah, 100%. Like, you have to keep everything basically with the same kind of colors, like the fonts, as you said, the branding. And I feel a lot of people really struggle with that. Like, they get the ad sometimes right, which is the most difficult part, but then the landing page is all over the place. And I think it comes down to something that you mentioned, that they don't really know, first of all, how to figure that out. So they might use some templates that are pre-made out there, and it's just a copy paste kind of strategy. They don't tailor that to their needs. And I guess what I'm trying to get with this is like how you actually identify how to basically prepare a landing page to touch on the psychology of a customer, because I guess uh, an audience that is within the pet space, let's say, is completely different psychology that's maybe products in the cosmetics and so on.
Right.
So I guess is there like a playbook when it comes to specific categories, what I'm trying to say, or how you actually figure out how to do those elements? You see what I mean? Like how you even get started? Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's an
mean, on
interesting
different
thing.
in different
Yeah.
industries, it might be a little bit,
Hmm.
you have to kind of look at your own industry. So one thing I'll kind of take a step back. When I'm looking at a site or I'm looking at a landing page, one of
Hmm.
the first thing I do before I jump into the optimization is, like I said, I look at those tools. I look at analytics, I look at heat maps,
Nice.
self-reporting. I look at all that stuff just in order for me to kind of formulate where are the problem areas based on these tools.
Mhm.
But then
Yeah.
I also do user research because I want to hear directly from the customer. I mean, that is something that I have accessible to me. Customer data, they're going to tell me from their own mouths what are some of the, either the struggles or what brought them to the site or what they're looking for, etc. We actually conduct a very specific niche type of interview method called jobs to be done, and this helps
Mm.
us really, it kind of jumps into, because we're really eager to find out the social and emotional aspects that drive
Yeah.
a purchase. I
Yeah.
don't really I don't care about the functional because that's probably very easy for me to find out.
Exactly.
I want to find out the social and emotional aspect, and this is again across the board. So if I want to, whatever industry you're in, whatever vertical you're in, this is going to help me gauge a little bit deeper into, again, the really inside, that's the subconscious, that sometimes it's really hard to kind of pull data and information from the customer. They're going to tell me in their own words what are those things, those drivers that brought them, why they selected your brand over other brands, etc. There's a whole
Of
science
course.
behind it. It's a certain type of customer, but all of that is going to really inform my strategy of how I'm going to
Hmm.
approach this page. What are the elements that I need to add on this page? What's
Exactly.
important? What's going to grab their attention? What's going to persuade them further? So all of those aspects, I have to do that research first in order
Hmm.
for me to be able to come up with really great ideas of what to implement on my page. And I would also say that, of course, as a conversion rate optimization company, we don't just go ahead and implement. We actually A/B
Hmm.
test everything that we do. So even if a change seems like very obvious and you think like, oh no, like this should make sense for our customers, for
Yes.
example, if we have this, I say no, like we want to measure it, because even if it makes sense, we want to see, well, what was the impact? Was it like a
Exactly.
10% lift? Was it a 20% lift? Was it only a 3% lift and we expected it to be more? Because perhaps there's going to be a lot more that I'm going to learn. Uh, A/B testing is not only for me to validate whether or not the concept worked, but it's also for me to measure the impact and for me to ask more questions. Like it's another
Yes.
research opportunity for me
Of course.
about the site and about just the visitor and learning more about the visitor, etc.
Yeah. And you mentioned there's something that I'm curious about, which is basically figuring out what are those elements to test, right? Because I guess it could reach a point that when you start doing your market research, identify what are some of the elements that maybe are very common in your industry, or by research that they tend to give good results. You might end up having so many ideas to test that then it could be challenging at the same time to know in which order you test them. Because I guess, and this is a question for you, like if you then start testing many things at the same time, realistically it's difficult for you to figure out what is actually driving that change, right? It's more like a roulette kind of casino style, right? And really go step by step. I'm testing this, it didn't work, I tested this. So what I'm trying to get is the methodology behind when you have so many elements and ideas. Like, do you have a procedure in mind, usually high level, that you recommend, like maybe start first with this, then with this, and this, and then with that?
Yeah.
or or realistically it's more first it comes and then you go from there? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, of course, like you said, when we do all this research, we actually end up with maybe anywhere between 100 to
Yeah.
150 different testing ideas, and that's a lot of
Yeah.
testing ideas. And that's only scratching the surface. Because, like I said, as we continue to test, we're going to be coming up with other concepts.
Mm,
There's going to be other questions and other ideas that come about. And sometimes there's also business objectives. Like you have specific big business objectives that you want to achieve.
yeah.
Hey, I want to increase average order value. Well, there are specific experiments that we want to test around how to increase average order value. So what we do is we have actually, and any conversion rate optimization company will have this, we have what we call prioritization methodology. So we
Mm,
literally have a prioritization sheet. We enter the information within the prioritization sheet, and then there's like different tabs. We select the options, and then it gives you a score at the end. And depending on the score, the higher the score, the more priority it is. And that way we're able to kind of then decide on which experiments we're going to actually pull first. But it might just happen that I might have like 3 product page experiments, listed one after the other. Well, in that case, I probably will do one in, like January, for example, or
mhm,
let's just say right now, or we're in March, one in March. And then I'm going to
mhm.
select the first experiment for category page. That's the first one that I'm going to do. And then cart. And so different pages, I could be running tests simultaneously. So I'm always running at least, 4 experiments per client within a month's time frame on different pages throughout the site.
Nice, nice. And actually there you're touching something that I was also curious, which is the timelines of this test, because I guess this is also going to be correlated to the data sample in terms of how much data goes through that funnel, because it's not the same you get 100 visits per month to 10,000 visits, right? It's a completely different ballgame. So
Yeah.
I guess being said that, how you like tailor the how long you need to test something before making a decision? Like, is there some guidelines there for that?
Yeah, so right now, if you just Google like sample size calculators, you can find a lot of different calculators that can tell you
Mm,
exactly the length of time that this experiment needs to run. So usually it is you enter the number of visitors that come to that site and then the conversion rate, and then it'll calculate how long the experiment actually has to run in order for you to reach a sample size. Yes, of course. I mean, if you have really little traffic, of course, A/B
mm,
testing probably won't work. But I will tell you, if you have little traffic, there are two things that you can do. Well, number one thing that you can do is you can still do the research, and you can still figure out like what are the changes that need to happen on your site. You might not be able to run it through an A/B test, or if you'd like to run it through an A/B test, what you can do is you can run it through an A/B test, but have sub goals. So, like for example, rather than the goal being the final conversion or an order confirmation or whatever it is,
mm,
you can do like the next page. Like I just want
mm.
visitors to go from the home page to the product pages, for example. So that way, again, like if you have little traffic, sometimes you can still reach a sample size, a reasonable sample size to stop the experiment within 2 to 3 weeks and get a conclusive result. And that way, just by measuring visitors getting to one of the other pages on the site rather than the final goal.
Okay, good. Now you also briefly mentioned before heat map, right? And
Mhm.
that's something I found super interesting because by, by going to multiple events and going to conference, sometimes you have people that talk about conversion, and sometimes you hear that story. Oh, just by changing the button from here to here, I had a 50% increase in sales, or just the color. Small things that you wouldn't think they would create such a crazy jump on performance. And I guess it comes out to the psychology of how people navigate a landing page, right? And there's a
Yeah.
whole science behind that. So I guess when it comes to that, like, what are some of maybe guidelines or conclusions you can share out of the experience you have with Hitmap? Like, is there specific elements as well that are big drivers of that? Like, and what I mean by that, for example, on Amazon, big drivers of conversion is pricing, reviews, and the main image, because those are the three main things that you see at all times. So I
Right.
guess on a landing page, there are things that are also a must, and it will be interesting to hear your take on that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so I would tell you one thing though, is you just want to always be aware of clickbait kind of titles
Mm,
because, like in any industry, oh, just by changing the button, we got like
yeah.
50, 75% increase in convert. I wish
Yeah.
things were that easy.
Yeah.
What I
Yeah.
would say, a lot of times those clickbait, sometimes they're anomalies and they could be true, but the reality is that a majority of A/B test experiments, probably those results, they didn't run long enough. Like you need to
Mm,
run your experiment in order for it to reach a sample size before you call it. Because a lot of times you'll launch an experiment and then within the first couple of days, you'll see it like, 75% increase in conversion rate. Everybody's like, celebrating. But then as time goes on and you're getting closer to the sample size, it actually starts evening out a little bit more and the increase is a lot less. So And you want to make sure, again, it also is a statistically significant result. So there's so many different aspects that I would say that, you have to be aware of those clickbaity kind of titles. Because really, if you look at the research, like whether it's VWO or Optimizely or
Yeah.
Google Optimize, those are like kind of like the top leading,
Hmm.
testing engines. Google Optimize, obviously sunset. But however, when they reported the amount of experiments that were launched on their platforms, they report almost like only 50% of the experiments that are launched on their platforms yield a positive result.
Oh,
Do you know what
okay.
I'm saying? So like
Yeah.
A/B testing is it's a lot of work, and CRO is a lot of work. There's research involved. You have to get into the nitty gritty detail, and the more experiments you run, and the more research you have, and the more founded in research they are, the more likely it is that they're going to account for positive results. Going back to heat mapping, uh, you know, I will say that having your CTA above the
Hmm.
fold is always a good practice. This is like a best practice that you find, across many different e-commerce websites. Just making sure that it's visible and across, above the fold, and perhaps even on mobile devices, sticky at the bottom of the page. We've found through doing lots of testing on this that majority of the time this yields a very positive result. Does it yield a positive result always? And should I just implement it? No, you should test
Hmm.
it. And the reason why is because it really depends on the type of product you're selling. For example, I'm selling something very expensive, furniture. I really need to get into the detail, sell them on it, provide them the description, tell them about the fabric, talk about all the details before I get them to actually click and purchase. So it's a different process. It's a different type of product. And perhaps moving that CTA above all of that information will not yield positive results for you. So you need to be really careful about how you approach the CTA
Hmm.
and what to do. And then also sometimes it's not about just changing like the CTA to like add to cart. Perhaps like, sometimes what we've done on some sites is, like we've tested with on a mobile site, for example, it's select size or select fabric or select blah blah, rather than seeing like the main add to cart CTA immediately. So it is
Hmm.
asking them to take an action, but not an action that's immediately just adding the item. We want to make sure that we're walking them through the product, whatever it may be.
Good.
Um, so yeah, so I would just say that, like, so that's one thing for heat mapping. Another really key one is, so heat mapping, it shows you obviously like where visitors are clicking, but there's also the scroll map feature, which shows you how
Mm.
deep visitors are scrolling. So if you have really important information on your page, but you find out based on the scroll map that visitors
Yeah.
aren't getting to that very important information on your page, guess what? It might be worthwhile for you to test moving that information higher up on the page and seeing what type of an impact it has. So again, it's just about you kind of doing those first, setting them up, and then looking at that heat mapping and scroll map and see like, okay, where are they clicking? How deep are they scrolling? And then based on that information, can I formulate any experiments that are going to be worthwhile based on this data?
Good. Now we are also mentioning on this point CTA, right? And basically you make a brief mention that we need to understand the benchmark of our niche, right? So, for example, I know on platforms such as Amazon, you kind of can figure that out because Amazon gives you that data. But when you go out there, like realistically, some of this data might be difficult to get because you don't have access to the backend of your competitor. So some of the leading brands that are within your niche. So I guess what I'm trying to get here is how you actually know you're doing good or you're doing bad, like how you compare yourself. Because I guess, and this may be another a second question after the first one, like once you define, which we're gonna learn now, how you define that benchmark, then how you decide when you're gonna need to stop doing split testing, or actually you never stop doing A/B testing. Like, is that something you always do?
Always
Like,
be testing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, well, it's a really great question, but I would say like your benchmark is also always your control. That's always my benchmark. So actually, whenever we start with a client, we always do what we call AA tests. And
Hmm.
that's just literally testing the control versus the control so we can benchmark the site. Hey, this testing tool has your homepage conversion rate as this, and your product page conversion rate as this, and your category
Hmm.
conversion rate as this. These are the benchmarks for your site. And we are testing against that control. Like whatever that conversion rate is, that's what we're testing against. So, and then, of course, with A/B testing, it's always, you're always, the control is the one that you're testing against. So you're, making the change and you see what impact did my change have on control, the real time data. The reason why this is so important to kind of understand is because there's so many factors that impact conversion, right? Like,
Yeah.
I, if I wish I could tell you that it's only our A/B testing,
Yeah, of course.
right? There's like the economy. There are
Hmm.
like other marketing initiatives. There are competitor changes.
Hmm.
All of those are fueling and impacting your actual conversion rate, and conversion rates fluctuate up and down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the beauty of A/B testing is it's for that period of time, it's taking a snapshot and it's telling you that in this time when you were testing this against this had a 5% increase or this had a 10% increase. So it's we don't like to call it like, A/B testings or CROs return on investment. We call it return on change. And that's the change that you're currently doing. That's what we're showing you. We're showing you that snapshot of like this particular change, and your benchmark and your control is always what we're testing against, and we're always trying to improve that.
Nice. Very good. Very good. Awesome. So, I mean, to be honest, we talked so many key points, and thank you so much. Like, even myself, I learned so many new things today. I'm sure people, though, it might be, intrigued to learn more or even work with you with this because, as I say, we have a ton of people and even that reach out to me all the time, like, oh, I need to jump D2C, but I'm really struggling with figuring out what to do in terms of conversion, how to figure out the elements and all of that. And I know your company specialize on that. So tell us a little bit about, how people can find you in the first place and how does the process of working with you looks like? Yeah.
So you can find me at my site, investcro.com. You can also find me on all socials, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, or even Instagram.
Okay.
And usually just search for my name and you'll find me. So the way that we work with companies, usually like, again, it's like a monthly retainer project. And we're usually, depending on the number of experiments that you want to run, 2, 4, 6, 8 experiments, the price but obviously changes as a result of that.
Hmm.
But we also do for smaller companies that, for example, are not ready to just jump into A/B testing themselves. We'll do something called a CRO audit, where we do all that research part that I'm telling you. We'll prioritize everything in the prioritization
Nice.
sheet. And all you have to do is actually just go ahead and implement the experiments yourself. But our service, actually, we do, the research, so this is the monthly retainer. We do the research, the design, as well as the
Nice.
implementation of the experiments. But again, like sometimes it could be a little bit costly for some companies. So,
Yeah.
sometimes if you have something in-house, if you're going to do A/B testing, to be honest, you really do need a developer and you need at least a designer. Like, you need
Yeah.
those
Of
two
course.
individuals. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit challenging to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So thank you so much. Pleasure. I'm sure we can have many more episodes in the future as this D2C movement happens from the marketplaces, which we see lately being a big thing. So it's a pleasure to have you on board. And yes, any questions, of course, to everybody listening and watching this episode, feel free to drop them down in the comments, and I'm gonna make sure to put all her information so you guys can reach out and improve those conversions. Yeah. So thank you so much. Yeah, let's keep in touch. Yeah, been a
Yep,
pleasure.
absolutely. Thank you for having me.
See ya. Bye bye.